Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Shrev, or Shrevin as my real name is, and I hope you all are doing well in this really weird year of 2020. Today I am in front of a camera instead of behind a microphone, and that's simply because I am too lazy to get B-roll for anything these days. So I figured, you know what, I might as well show my face off here for once and show you what I look like 9 months without a haircut. Anyways, today I want to talk about backwards compatibility in the consoles and what it's looking like right now as we go into the upcoming console generation with the PS5 and the Xbox Series S and X. I'll talk a little bit about my personal experience with backwards compatibility, how I think it's beneficial, and how it's confusing as we're like 50 days, less than 50 days away from the consoles releasing. So, let's just jump right into it. So my experience with the consoles and backwards compatibility started off on the PlayStation 2. So I grew up with a PlayStation 1 because my parents are very cool parents, and so I got a bunch of PlayStation 1 games, such as Croc right here. Good game, by the way. I recommend it. I had a bunch of PS1 games. I liked it. I was not very good at any of them. I can guarantee that. I'm still not good at video games today, but I wasn't good at them back then either. And well, I amassed a bunch of PS1 games, but then my PS1 actually broke. It stopped reading discs, and it's still in the garage somewhere because I haven't gotten around to diagnosing it. But that led to the consideration of a PlayStation 2. I had my PlayStation 1 well into the PS2's life cycle, though the PS2 does have a very grand life cycle, as I'm sure you're aware. But around 2002, 2003 was when my PS1 sort of died down on me, and that's when I was like, hey, well, actually, I want to play PS2 games. Well, I don't want to play PS2 games, I want to play video games again. And that's when the PS2 came into consideration, because I had a big library of PS1 games, and I just wanted to play them again. But I didn't want to get a PS1, so my parents were like, hey, the PS2 is sort of the new thing here. Let's try one, let's get it, and yeah, so I ended up with a slim PlayStation 2. It's like a 700 something model, for those of you who care. And it was backwards compatible with PlayStation 1 games. I just took my PS1 game, put it in the PS2, it read, and it worked. And it had the memory card slots as well, so I could take my PS1 memory card, put it in my PS2, and voila! I was off to the races again with my PS1 library. And of course, since it was a PlayStation 2, I could pick up the PlayStation 2 games. So just Sly 2, Sly 1, Sly 3, Ratchet, Jack, God of War. The point is, my PS1 library, which is pretty big, I think it was around 30 games, which for like 6-year-old is massive, did not go to waste. I was able to just put it in my PS2 and play it. That was awesome, right? As far as technical advantages for like an 8-year-old, I had no idea. Like it ran the game fine, and that's really all I could care about. That's really all I could ask for. But then we get a little later into where the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 are coming up, 2006. And that's when things start to get a little messy here. As you all know, Sony announced their PlayStation 3 at a truly wonderful price point that shook the market, and it didn't do so hot. And a lot of the cost for the PlayStation 3 at the time of release, was the fact that they literally put a PlayStation 2 into the PlayStation 3. Because as you could imagine, right, the PS2 was a very, very popular console, not just for PS1 backwards compatibility, but PS1 backwards compatibility was an aspect of it. If Sony were to just say, okay, we're going to launch the PS3, but that massive PS2 library you have, you can't play it on the PS3, that would have been not so great for Sony. So they come out with the PlayStation 3 with an actual PlayStation 2 like motherboard in there, just so it could play PlayStation 2 games. And of course, the cost was terrible especially compared to the Xbox 360. The price difference was just, it was bad. It was bad for Sony, and it caused them to actually just take out that compatibility in future iterations of the PlayStation 3. So this PS2 game, I could stick it into like a day one PlayStation 3, and it would run pretty well. But my current PS3, which is a super slim PS3, had no chance of that PS2 game going in there at all. Wasn't a big deal for me at the time because my PS2 works, and knocking on wood, still works. But it was a little troubling to see that happen. Obviously, the cost was cheaper. I think I ended up picking the PS3 for like $200. $200. So I mean, cost-wise, I was a happy customer, but for someone who had like a massive PS2 library and their PS2 was out of luck, it was kind of a bummer. Now, of course, Sony did remedy this a little bit by bringing over PlayStation 2 remasters to the PlayStation 3. Sly Collection, Jack and Daxter Collection, Ratchet and Clank Collection, Shadow of the Colossus, and Ico were remastered, and those were like solid PlayStation 2 games that were remastered for the PlayStation 3. So you could play those games at higher resolutions, maybe a fixed frame rate. Shadow of the Colossus, for instance, ran like the mid 20s on the PlayStation 2. It was running at a fixed 30 on PlayStation 3. God of War 1 and 2, same sort of scenario there. Those were remastered and brought to the PlayStation 3. So Sony did a pretty good job of bringing those titles that were from the massively wonderful PS2 library, remastering them and bringing them on to PlayStation 3. So not only were you getting to be able to play the games again, but you're also getting a better experience. Now it's a little optimistic because let's be real, you had to pay for the games again, despite you already owning them maybe, but you were getting some tangible benefits, which I think is pretty awesome. PlayStation 4 time comes around, and yeah, we're back to sort of that PlayStation 3 era where backwards compatibility just wasn't a thing. The PlayStation 3's entrance was a bit of a kick for Sony, and the PlayStation 3's exit in terms of developing the PS4 also kind of got them. The PS4 just wasn't backwards compatible with PlayStation 3 or PlayStation 2 or even PlayStation 1. Now, Sony has remedied this a little bit, similar to their strategy with the PlayStation 3. For the PlayStation 4, they remastered a ton of games, or even remade some. Uncharted 1, 2, and 3, for instance, were remastered and brought over to the PlayStation 4. Kingdom Hearts brought over to the PlayStation 4. Shadow of the Colossus remade for the PlayStation 4. Which brings us to this current upcoming console generation, where backwards compatibility is confusing, as you might have guessed from this video's title. So as we're going into the upcoming console generation, backwards compatibility has started to become more and more hopeful for owners of PS4 and Xbox One games. This isn't entirely surprising, as the next-gen consoles are running the same instruction sets as the current-gen consoles. x86. This wasn't the case going from the PS3 to PS4, where the PS3 ran a very different architecture compared to what the PS4 ran on, which contributed to PS3 games just not being able to run on PS4. But with backwards compatibility being a hope and being a thing that's actually been announced from both PlayStation and Microsoft, well, what does it mean? This is where the soapbox part of this video comes in, because I don't know, and I really wish there'd be more communication about it. So I'm going to talk about two games in particular, and then I'm going to sort of drift over to how Sony and how Microsoft are approaching this, and in particular Microsoft's history with it, and their just openness to the consumer as we go into this current generation. So I want to bring up two examples. Control Ultimate Edition and Spider-Man Remaster. Control Ultimate Edition, as you might have heard, was a bit of a controversy. So Control, if you don't know, was a game developed by Remedy and published by 505 Games, and it came out last year. It was a pretty good success for Remedy. They tend to make really good games. I loved Alan Wake and I liked Quantum Break, despite the latter getting some mixed reviews, but by and large, Control did very well. It reviewed very well, and it sold very well. It did have a lot of performance issues at launch on consoles, even on the enhanced ones, PlayStation 4 Pro and Xbox One X, but in terms of the substance of the game, it did very well. And of course, because it sold commercially well, you can imagine that people actually bought the game. Well, come a year later, and 505 Games decides to announce the Control Ultimate Edition. Now, the Ultimate Edition, for all intents and purposes, is basically the base game, Control the base game, and Control Season Pass, just in one little package for $40. Now, for someone like me who buys their games like maybe 2 years after release, this is a great thing for me. Like, I can finally get one package for me that I can, that I can play. I'll have all the DLC, and it's not terribly expensive. But for owners of the game already, like the people who helped to make the game a commercial success, they're out of luck. Now, normally this isn't a new thing, right? Games come out with like their Ultimate Edition or their Deluxe Edition or their Game of the Year Edition with, everything in one package, and they come out with it. Like a year later, it's nothing new. But this is where the backwards compatibility thing comes into play, because 505 Games selectively locked out specific next-gen upgrades to Ultimate Edition owners only. So the people with the base game and the Season Pass but bought them separately or at launch or whatever, they don't get any next-gen upgrades for PS5 or Xbox Series, despite the game, being backwards compatible, which is a little odd and just honestly a kick in the teeth for the people who bought the game in the first place. And obviously, I understand, right? I don't want to be like the entitled gamer or whatever. There is dev time, you know, to consider when it comes to incorporating like a higher frame rate, ray tracing, faster loading times with SSDs. And so I understand that, but the issue is this announcement came at a time where certain publishers and developers had already committed to saying, hey, look, we're going to give you our next gen upgrades for these games for free. CD Projekt Red, the poster child of this, came out and said, hey, Witcher 3 owners, you know that game you bought back in 2015? Yeah, we're going to give you the next gen upgrades for that game for free. You just put your PS4 or Xbox 3, Xbox One disc into your PS5 or Xbox Series, and it'll automatically get you the next gen upgrades at no cost to you. CD Projekt Red's not the only one either. There have been a variety of publishers that have come out and said, "Hey, yeah, we're gonna give you the next gen upgrades for these games, especially for the games that are coming out like this November for both PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. Those upgrades will be there for all the copies of the games." So for 505 Games to come out and say, "Hey, yeah, we're locking all of these next gen upgrades behind a $40 Ultimate Edition," is a little disheartening to say the least for owners of the current game, the people who made Control successful. So that's one example I want to bring up, and that leads me to one point that I'll mention along with the second example here, and that's, well, if I have the Control PS4 disc and I just put it into my PS5 console or Xbox console, how will it run? Will it run at all? Will I get any enhancements at all? Will it run in the sort of boost mode wrapper that both Sony and Microsoft have sort of informally announced, or will it just run the same as it did on like base PS4 or base Xbox One, or will it run on like how it did on PS4 Pro or Xbox One X? I don't know. And that brings me to my second example, Spider-Man PS4. The poster child of the PS4 late in its generation, and seemingly the poster child of the PS5. Spider-Man's a weird example here, but it's essentially the same as Control, right? Except a little more confusing. So Spider-Man on PS4 released back in 2018, late 2018, and it reviewed very well. I personally haven't played it, but I was really looking forward to play it when it hit $10 later this year, because that's the kind of cheap ass I am. But it reviewed very well, and by and large, it was a very good game. It was your usual first-party Sony game of the PlayStation 4. It did very well. But you get into Spider-Man Miles Morales, which, to be frank, in my opinion, has been very weird in its marketing. It's been very unclear about what this game was. It was unclear about whether it's an expansion or it's going to be like a remaster of the Spider-Man game, or is it a brand new sequel to Spider-Man? It's been weird. A lot of that has been clarified at to give Insomniac and Sony credit. It is an expansion to Spider-Man PS4. Spider-Man Miles Morales is an expansion to Spider-Man PS4, coming to both PS4 and PS5. The tricky thing with this is, while you can play the PS4 version on your PS5, and you'll get the next gen upgrades there for free, Miles Morales Ultimate Edition includes Spider-Man PS4 Remastered. So just to reiterate, right? Miles Morales is coming out on both PS4 and PS5. You can pick up Miles Morales on the PS4, play it now if you want, and then when you get your PS5, you can stick your Miles Morales disc or your digital license, I guess, into the PS5, and you'll get the next gen upgrades for Miles Morales for free. No problem about that. Spider-Man PS4, however, is a weird thing, because there's Spider-Man PS4 Remastered included only in the Miles Morales Ultimate Edition, only on PS5. Hey guys, just a quick clarification here to prevent the spread of misinformation. If you buy the PS4 version of Miles Morales, you do get a free next-gen upgrade to the PS5 version, either with your PS4 disc into the PS5 or your PS4 digital edition going over to the PS5. Once you have this PS5 version, you will have a chance to purchase Spider-Man Remastered, so it's not necessarily locked behind the Miles Morales Ultimate Edition. Now, what is Spider-Man Remastered, you might ask? Now, Insomniac has come out and said, like all these features, ray tracing, 60 FPS performance mode, uh, lots of better shadows, higher details, etc., faster loading times. They've come out and said that. But it's just a little confusing because now it opens this weird rabbit hole of what does backwards compatibility mean for this generation? Because now if I take like my Spider-Man PS4, just in this case Uncharted 4 for PS4, and I stick it in, actually, if I take my Spider-Man, imagine this is Spider-Man. If I take my Spider-Man game disc and put it into my PS5 disc edition, how will it run? Will it run at all, or will it prompt me to say, "Hey, you should buy the remastered edition," or will it run at any sort of boost mode wrapper, or will it run the same way it did as on PS4 Pro, or will it run on the same way as it did on base PS4? None of this has been made very clear, which has been a little annoying from Sony's end. And also, it's a little weird to say Spider-Man PS4 Remastered is exclusive to the Miles Morales Ultimate Edition on PS5. Now, Insomniac has said that they are looking into other options of bringing Spider-Man PS5 Remastered PS5 separately as a separate purchase, for owners who don't necessarily want the Miles Morales Ultimate Edition on PS5, which, by the way, costs $70. So you know, sink your teeth into that one for a bit. But it's a little weird to see that approach nevertheless, because now it just makes me a little concerned as a consumer. How will the base disc run if I just put it into my console? Will I get any upgrades at all? Or will it just run the same way as it did on the PS4? And if it does, which PS4 will it run the same as? PS4 or PS4 Pro? Because I could see some developers saying, yeah, we'll just take the base PS4 implementation and, put it on PS5. I wouldn't suspect many would, but I wouldn't be surprised if some do. And this leads me to talking about Microsoft now, because Sony, for all of their glory in the PS4 era, has been very quiet. Definitely so when it comes to backwards compatibility, among other things about the PS5. Whereas Xbox has been very open about it. From early on in this year, they've been open about their console architecture, the features that the Xbox Series is capable of. They've really screwed up the naming of the consoles, but whatever. But one thing they've been really hard on is backwards compatibility, and this also stems back to their sort of history. The 360, surprisingly, was backwards compatible in the era when the PS3 was not, and then midway through the Xbox One cycle, Microsoft all of a sudden was like, hey, backwards compatibility with your 360 and Xbox OG games is possible. Now, granted, the list is not like 100%, but by and large, it's a huge game library for Microsoft to take advantage of. You could take your Xbox 360 disc, put it in your Xbox One, and it would run. Early on, this program was a little bit hit and miss, but now it's matured and it's just done really well. And if you ran it on the Xbox One X, you could get cases like Red Dead Redemption 1 running at a fixed 30 FPS at a native 4K on the Xbox One X. And that's just with your 360 disc. Like that's been really cool to me. So Xbox has always been a little more consumer friendly to me as opposed to Sony. Yeah, Sony's been developing great games and kudos to them. These have been really fun games for me. But looking at sort of the consumer friendliness of it in terms of how friendly is a corporation to me as someone who's giving them my money at the end of the day, I'm leaning a lot more towards Microsoft as we enter this console generation because Xbox has just been more open to communication. In the last week or two, they got the Xbox Series X in the hands of tech media. Your favorite YouTubers, your favorite tech websites, they have their hands on the Xbox Series X. And they're allowed to do whatever they want to, really. They can just use it as a Series X. And of course, I'd imagine information will trickle out, over the coming weeks. But one of the first things they came out with, the past week or two was backwards compatibility. Just how does it work on the Series X? Um, and what sort of improvements are there that we could see, as people who own like these libraries already, right? And so Tech Press went to town with it. They were like, hey, here's our base Xbox One games. Let's toss them to Series X and see what happens. And a lot of people were pretty happy with it. You could see games running, you know, If it was like a locked 30 FPS game, it would run, at a locked 30 FPS. But if it was a game that was unlocked, such as like Hitman or GTA 4, other unlocked games, those games that might have ran like in the mid 40s on Xbox One X were all of a sudden running 60 or close to 60 on Xbox Series X. And that was not even through like developer implementation, which is insane because if the developers take advantage of this, then who knows what the possibilities are. And GTA 4 especially is something I want to touch on because GTA 4 was an Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 title that had an unlocked frame rate, but of course it ran all over the place, and it did the same thing on Xbox One. But on Xbox Series X, it's running at a full fat 60 FPS fixed. And that's awesome. As someone who owns all of these games, seeing these potential performance improvements is it's honestly just awesome. Like it makes me excited as a consumer. And the thing is, that's only making me excited for Microsoft. Sony hasn't really said how backwards compatibility is going to work, whether it'll be as easy as putting your disc in, seeing the benefits come to you, or whether it entails buying a brand new version of the game just because. And that's what makes me sort of worried for Sony. I'm not really worried for them, but I just wish they'd speak up a little more. We're less than 2 months away from the consoles releasing. People have already put down their money to pre-order these boxes, but they don't really know what features it entails. Part of that is, of course, on the consumer for pre-ordering. Don't pre-order. But part of it, most of it, I would say, is on the companies themselves disclosing information about what their boxes actually do, or at least, sort of marketing them. Sony has the games, sure, but how do they run? Xbox has been a lot more friendly on that front. They've said how their games will run, how, quick resume will work, all these features. And they've been very consumer friendly in saying, look, all your accessories, they'll work with these games. The new accessories will work on your old boxes. That's that appeals more to me as a consumer who has like these game libraries everywhere. But I guess it just sort of goes back to the title of this video. Backwards compatibility is confusing. I get it, Sony has the games, but Xbox has been a little more consumer friendly in terms of how the games will work, how the games will run. There have been even teases of stuff like Gears 5 running at a 4K 120 FPS mode on the Series X. As someone who cares about those tech specs, that's really cool. But Sony has been very quiet about this. I wish they'd speak up. A lot of people are more optimistic than I am and are saying Sony's just got it like in their sleeve. They just got to pull it out, and they're going to pull it out, and they're just going to own Microsoft. Or they're going to be like, Sony, they'll get the job done. They'll say, you know what, it's backwards compatible in this way, and they'll come out with it eventually. Maybe I'm just being impatient, and I completely get that, right? Obviously, we still have a little bit of time left until the consoles actually come out. So there's a lot of time to give out information, more technical details about how the consoles actually run. But I don't know. It's a little weird to me. And for those of you who might say, "Oh, who cares about backwards compatibility? I just want the new games." I understand that. I really do. But as someone who also owns like a bunch of games and who has limited space for new consoles, backwards compatibility plays in more ways than one. For one, it's just a space saver. If I buy the PS5, I don't have to own my PS4 anymore, and I could still play these games. Um, and if I buy like a Series X at launch, I have the whole back catalog of Xbox original, Xbox 360, and Xbox One's games that I can play on day one on the Series X. That's a massive library, and I don't think it should be ignored. Yeah, you could say whatever you want about Microsoft versus Sony's first party titles, but that catalog is huge. And with Xbox showing potential performance improvements for those games, you could play those games at potentially higher resolutions and higher frame rates. Obviously, nothing is confirmed about that yet, but the possibility of that is already more tempting than whatever Sony's trying to do here, which admittedly they've been really quiet about. So as a consumer, I think backwards compatibility is really important. And I think, being able to play your old games, or at least being able to preserve your old games, right? For one, it saves you money because you don't have to rebuy games. Thanks, Control. But two, like if you got generous publishers, they'll give you not just the base game, but they'll give you the enhancements for that game just because you own the disc already, or you own the digital license already. And that's important to me as a consumer. I don't like rebuying stuff I already own unless there's a tangible benefit to it. But at the end of the day, right, I'm a fairly simple consumer. If I could pop my PS4 disc in there, I get nothing else besides like a 60 FPS mode for games like these, call me a happy customer. A lot of PS4 titles, especially, were locked at 3 FPS, but there have been, we've seen the possibility of like Uncharted 4, Spider-Man PS4, um, you know, Last of Us Part 2 running at 60 FPS, a simulated 60 FPS. And so that would be awesome. I don't need the ray tracing, I don't need the faster loading times. They'd be nice, but just a little toggle to be like, hey, we can run this game at like an unlocked frame rate, and it'll take advantage of the better hardware in the PS5 to run this at potentially 60 FPS. Call me a happy customer there. But of course, it remains to be seen what exactly backwards compatibility means. For all we know, it could just be, it could be what I've wanted. It could just be something like, oh, you'll have to rebuy the same game again. We'll have to wait and see. And obviously, I'm sure my opinion will change as we get more and more information about that. Um, but until then, backwards compatibility is confusing. And honestly, it still might be confusing until the consoles actually release and get into the hands of consumers. But that's been my soapbox of a video. If you guys enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments down below. What are your opinions on backwards compatibility? Do you think it matters? Do you think it doesn't matter? Let me know. I'm always open to different opinions and hearing them out. If I made any inaccuracies in this video, because I did do a little bit of research, but a lot of this was off the cuff, please, please, please let me know in the comments down below, and I'll be happy to correct myself, because the last thing I want to do is spread misinformation. And of course, if you like this kind of content, let me know as well. I don't know how this will go, but if you do want to see more of these sort of ranty type videos from me, let me know, and I'll be happy to make more. If you didn't like it, let me know that as well, and I won't make more of these. It's that simple. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you and your families are staying safe in this weird time of the world, and I'll see you in the next video.